Hello, namaste, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to the Divine Nobodies podcast. I'm your host, Eric Ajna. I'm joined by the luminous Jennifer Lynn. Jennifer, how are you?
Doing well. Luminous, huh?
I like that, huh?
I do.
Put a little spin on that. A little zhuzh.
A little zhuzh.
Yeah, it's been a luminous day, and we have a really special guest in our studio that we're actually going to have a phone call with here in a bit. And she's a really special woman. She's well-versed in something that me and you are actually really interested in and fascinated with, and that is the realm of astrology.
Yes.
Yeah, so she actually is the moderator of iChat Astrology. She can actually be found on Instagram. She has a lot of really amazing content on there, and her practice is in Evolutionary Astrology. You heard about Evolutionary Astrology?
No, and I'm super excited to learn about it.
If you don't know, you better start studying.
You don't know, now you know.
It's taking over. It's going to be a really amazing interview. We're going to ask a lot of questions, really get to know her and find out a little bit more about her journey into evolutionary astrology.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so definitely stay tuned. Thank you guys again for tuning in. We'll see you on the other side. Namaste. Hello, good evening. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Divine Nobodies podcast. I'm your host, Eric Ajna. I'm joined here by my co-host, Jennifer Lynn.
Hello.
Hello. We have a really amazing guest in our studio today. We actually have her on the phone, and we're going to be asking her a lot of different questions about astrology. We're really, really grateful to have Yvette Thomas with us. Yvette, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on your show. This is my first time.
Oh, it's your first time.
It's my first podcast ever.
So congratulations. But this is actually an inaugural thing for us too, because we're doing our very first sort of phone interview. So we're going to go and run through this together, and we're going to have some fun along the way. So we have a lot of ground to cover. And we also have a lot of questions. Me and Jen, we ascribe to astrology in our own lives. And of course, whenever Mercury comes out of the sky and starts moving backwards, it's something that we pay attention to. And as far as I understand, Mercury is in retrograde right now, right?
I think yesterday it finally started to go forward. So yeah, we can all breathe now, right?
That's crazy, because I actually started to feel the shift in the energy yesterday too.
Yeah.
And I know it's not like a gradual thing where it's just, the second it hits midnight, things start to change. I feel like I started to feel that subtle sort of progression in it moving forward.
Oh yeah, because what happens is, as the planet Mercury will start to slow down, so you feel the energy kind of subside, maybe a day or two, and what that is they call it stationary. So meaning that so Mercury, when it's retrograde, obviously the planet is spinning backwards. And as it's approaching to go direct, it slowly starts to move slower. And then eventually it gets to like a stopping place. And they call that Mercury is stationary, meaning it's not moving. And then within, a couple of hours or whatever, it starts to move forward again. So as it is slowing down, it's moving backward, you start to feel the energy sort of lift, not as strong. And especially if you have Mercury that's transiting, and what that means is that Mercury is actually touching a natal planet in your chart. And so when that happens, those people tend to feel the energy pretty deeply, versus if, it's transiting in a house of your chart where it's not touching any planets.
So what do you think people have this sort of negative connotation behind Mercury retrograde? I myself have a moon in Gemini, and I think Jen also has a moon in Gemini too.
I also do, yeah.
Yeah, and so we have like a very mercurial nature when it comes to how we communicate. And I feel like during Mercury retrograde, I feel kind of activated in some ways that I'm not normally kind of used to otherwise. But why do you think people have sort of like a negative underpinning behind Mercury retrograde?
So in theory, with astrology, what Mercury retrograde is it happens about every 3 months for a span of anywhere from 2.5 to 3 weeks, depending on the sign and time and things things of that sort. And really what it is it's a time to reflect. So retrograde, everything is right? So it's a time to reflect on your last prior 3 months, just in life in general. So during that time, they will say, don't sign any contracts, don't make any decisions. It's not a decision-making time. It's a reflection time. It's a review during the retrograde. So what happens is that people will say, oh my gosh, it's the Mercury retrograde, things are happening, it's bad, the planet is going backwards, communication is messed up. And it's true that you do get communication breakdown, or just, I feel like it's random electronic stuff, that kind of a thing, because it's just like it's Mercury. Mercury is the planet of communication. It's like a trickster planet. It's a very youthful energy. And so it's not a time that you're supposed to make any big decisions or go out and, do something, important per se. And they'll always say, because people will say, oh my gosh, I got a job during the Mercury retrograde. Am I going to get fired? What's going to happen? And so they'll say, no, what happens is if you're working on, say for an example, getting a job prior to the retrograde, and you happen to just have to sign the contract during the retrograde, what they say is that, maybe something will change, during your job, meaning you could get a promotion in 6 months, or you can make more money, or, just something will change. So
we actually
that's what they say about.
Yeah, we actually had a fun little Mercury retrograde electronic issue. Our very first podcast that we recorded together, we had our new mixer, and we had a guest that was in from Utah, so he wasn't a local guest, so we were super happy to have him, and just the stars aligned where it was the right time to have him in. And we ended up not catching any of the audio because there was just something electronically going on with our mixer, and we were so bummed we lost that whole interview. And after the interview was over, I was like, dang it, retrograde got us. It got us this time.
Yeah.
It's things like that.
Yeah, when I'm at, I have a friend at work, and she's really into astrology, and whenever Mercury retrograde comes around, she always has something to say. But the other day, she was just like, somebody needs to take Mercury out of the sky. So thank you so much for sharing.
That's the ruler. Yeah.
So we have we got a lot to cover, and the one thing that was interesting that I noticed in your bio is that you have this thing called Evolutionary Astrology, and I don't know how that differs from maybe Vedic astrology or like tropical zodiac sort of stuff, but can you elaborate more on what evolutionary astrology is?
Sure. So evolutionary astrology looks at astrology, and they look at the planet Pluto being a representation of your soul. Okay, so the school of thought with evolutionary astrology is that they believe in past lives, and they believe that the soul travels from life to life. And so when you come into this life, your soul has a memory, and it remembers all of your past lives, and it comes in with certain unconscious behaviors, and you do things that you don't even know why you do them. And it also talks about the soul having past life lessons and what those lessons were. And as a result of those lessons, you now have new lessons in this life. And so they use the natal chart to uncover what your past life lessons were and what your current life lessons are, and sort of like the issues that you come into this life with as a result of your past life.
Got it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I noticed, I'm going to kind of segue into the relationship component of it, because you talked a lot about that as far as how your past lives, how your past relationships, I'm guessing this is both maybe platonic and non-platonic, how they affect the current incarnation that you're in right now. So before we get into the relationship part, can you maybe talk a little bit about the difference between soulmates, twin flames, and maybe karmic relationships?
Yeah. So, okay. So Okay, so a karma mate is somebody that you have karma with, okay? Or it could be, I don't know how to explain this. Okay, so for an example, if you're learning a lesson from like you had issues in a past life, so say that you had like bonding issues from a past life, okay, and another person had the same kind of bonding issues. In this life, you guys have agreed, you made a soul commitment, a soul agreement to get together, and you each are going to work on your bonding issue, okay? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship that you guys had in the past life created that bonding issue as a result of being in a relationship together. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so a karma mate is somebody that you're going to work out, you know, similar karmas together. You guys signed up to do it. Now a soulmate, I like to call a soulmate like a soul grinder, okay? Because the relationship, in my experience and through the readings that and charts that I've read, the meaning, the soulmate basically loves you enough to stay with you and to get through the karma that the two of you have created. And it's usually not fun. Okay. It's not. And that's why I call it like a soul grinder. And the thing is it's almost like you love each other so much that you're unconsciously committed to staying together. Do you know what I mean? And through this tumultuous climb of this mountain, you're like, oh my God, wow, that was harsh. Let me take a step back. Yeah. Oh, wow, I am definitely not the same person I was when I met this person. Yeah, it was rough. Yeah, I love him or I love her, but wow, you know. So to me, that's, you know, so when I will see that in a chart and somebody will be saying, this is my soulmate, I know it, I love them, it's them. And I will say, yes, put on your protective headgear. It's going to be a climb, you know?
So when you say, when you go through a lot of these sort of hurdles that couples kind of go through in soulmate relationships, is it a sustainable thing where they end up sort of being together for the rest of their lives? Or is this something that kind of just comes along as a temporary thing?
It just depends. You know, sometimes they can stay in your life forever. Sometimes it's for 10 minutes and sometimes, you know, 10 years. It depends on when you unwind that chart. It depends on the lesson and how much karma, you know, is going on. So for an example, you can get charts that have a lot of connections, cross connections, which we call it synastry in astrology. And when you see a chart that's just, you know, enmeshed with, you know, 50 connections, or where you have something that, for an example, you know, my Venus might aspect your Neptune, and then also my Neptune might aspect your Venus, and that's called a double whammy. So if you and Venus is a personal planet, and Neptune is a karmic planet, and so when you get those type of connections, and if you get a lot of double whammies in there, they're probably in for a while. Now, how that plays out, you know, it's all free will, and it depends on the story that, you know, they've written, but it could be for a lengthy period of time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it almost is like the quality of the relationship and not so much the duration in which it happens.
Right. And then you also have to remember, you know, because we do have free will, some people just might say, hey, you know, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do this, you know? And so what happens is that when that happens, the relationship, you know, may dissolve because a person's just not willing to do the work. And how are you going to evolve and grow if a person isn't willing? Then in my experience, the universe will bring in someone else, you know, because we can have many soulmates. We don't just have one.
So it's not one of those things where, I mean, I guess it could be, but I'm just, do we have typically maybe one soulmate that sort of travels with us throughout our life and other dimensions that we choose to incarnate with and go through this type of work?
Yeah. So, you know, some people might meet a soulmate this life, and some people might not. It depends on what the lesson is. But if your lesson is a love lesson, or has to do with any type of relating in some way, you can bring in a soulmate. It all depends on the karmic or the soul agreement that we made prior to this life. So it's almost like we don't really know, will we get one? Will we not? How does it work out?
So I wonder if it's a question of accelerating the relationship, or maybe if you made this agreement prior to being born here, that they would maybe teach you a lesson about self-love by maybe either leaving you or getting you to sort of wake up, or maybe basically act as a catalyst in maybe one particular lifetime. And even though they end up not staying, fundamentally, I think from the universal perspective, that occurrence caused me to start maybe introspecting and working on myself, which ultimately would lead to sort of like a self-love type of thing.
Correct. Yes.
I think that I have a soulmate and a friend, actually, but for a different way. I think that we definitely have a soulmate relationship, and we were brought back here together to support one another, because this was going to be a really rocky time. But I have had visions and meditation of past lives with this person as a brother, and and even in a female sense, I could tell that it was his spirit, but in a woman. So
yes, and that's it. And that's the thing, is that we change genders throughout the lifetimes, and because we need to, sometimes you need to be a woman because you need to learn what women lessons, so your gender is woman, or you need to switch it because the next life you need to be a man, because those are the type of lessons that you need to learn. So it's very challenging sometimes, where people can be very confused. I've met people before who will tell me, I'm heterosexual, but I've left my husband and I am in a same-sex relationship, but I'm not gay. There's something wrong, And so when you unwind the chart, and you go through it, you can see in the last life they were a man. So it was like a heterosexual, but the soul doesn't remember that. It doesn't remember genders. You know what I mean? It remembers experiences. It remembers feelings. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So now that we've talked about soulmates, can you maybe go into the dynamics of twin flames?
So the dynamic of twin flames is that it's the soul splits, and so the soul splits, and the other half is looking for the other half. That is like the whole twin flame deal. My thing is that I don't really know much about, per se, twin flames, because you get into the whole theory of, well, is it a karma mate? Is it a soulmate? Is it a twin flame? Nope, it's this. And so I kind of believe that whatever a person feels, that they should go with, because whether it's a karma mate, or whether it's a soulmate, or whether it's a twin flame, there's a connection. Do you really need to put a label on it? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's the reason why there is a lot of confusion around this very thing, right? Because depending on who you talk to, they'll give you a different story when it comes to the twin flame sort of soulmate thing. So we sort of start looking at it in a systematic way, and we start compartmentalizing and making it sort of like a standard that maybe they're looking for. And I think you're right. I think it just comes down to that sort of the emotional synergy that you have and the spiritual connection that you have with that person. And I think like we intuitively will feel that with our partners, right?
Right. And I think that when you meet a person that you have a karmic connection with, I think you feel it. I think you know it. You might say, oh, wow, I've never felt this before, but I feel like I know this person, or, I'm going to be with that person, like love at first sight. And we've been together ever since, or, I think that the souls know it. It's almost like it's like, wow, there's the person. You know what I mean? They can feel the energy. And then I kind of think that the rest is history, with respect to their story.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of segue into, it mentioned kind of in your bio that you, a part of maybe acted as one catalyst into venturing in this sort of realm, but you had entered, you had exited out of a 7-year relationship, right?
Yeah.
And did that sort of act as a catalyst for you to start venturing into this type of work?
Yes. So what happened for me was that I got involved in relationships, had, 7 years prior. And at the 7-year period, I decided to end it, and it wasn't, I loved him extremely, extremely, but I have a Gemini moon. So with a Gemini moon, it's okay, this isn't working out. So here's what I'm going to do. Here's the plan. And I'm just going to move forward. Okay. End of story. It's all fine. Yes, I love him and it was great, but it's just not working. So moving on. So what happened is that even though that was the plan and that was the path, and that's what I did, I felt like he was with me all the time. And I wanted to make that go away because in my mind, on an academic level, I had made my decisions and I was very good with it. And so I started on a quest thinking, I need to go to a psychic. I need to figure this out because I can't take it. How am I supposed to go on when this guy's like living on my shoulder, And so I went to Sedona and, I did a bunch of different things and I didn't find anything. And I was reading all of these astrology books and it was very difficult for me to live a normal life, especially moving on with new partners and things like that, because the guy was right here. So I came across this evolutionary astrology and I'm talking, this is back in, 2008, I think it was. And the website looks like something from GeoCities or when the internet first started. It was very scary, but I was like, this is it. This is well, what is this? And this guy had one book. And so long story short, I ordered all of these DVDs and I just dove into it. And it was the first time that I had ever read, when you have a connection, it's called a karmic connection. And when you have these aspects, you have spent many, many past lives with this person. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. And so at that point, I said to myself, okay, get it. I'm good. I understand. This is, I get this. And it was at that point also that I realized that there is a difference between what your soul wants and what your ego wants. And at the end of the day, your soul will win out. And that is can be a very frustrating situation, because if you don't almost open yourself up and go with the flow, it's almost like you can have some cataclysmic events, you know what I mean? Because you're going to continue to learn the same lesson. And it's not going to be fun. So I can tell you 20 years later, I did end up back with that person.
Wow.
So, I've been with him for a long time, but it didn't end at that 7-year mark, but he was the catalyst to me finding evolutionary astrology. It was because of my relationship with him that I was driven, to find what I was looking for. I've grown as a person. I can't even begin to tell you.
Yeah.
But so that was it.
Wow.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So how do you think that our past relationships impact the relationships in this life? Because there are a lot of people, I think, out there in the world that maybe aren't aware of how those previous relationships are impacting their current relationship. Now, do we bring memories or maybe feelings from a past life? Is it down to a specific person that we start feeling these things with, or is it just sort of like a general feeling of maybe behaviors that we
Yeah. So it's kind of it can be a scope of things. So for an example, you can have like power and will issues. Okay. And so as an example is that in a prior life, you could have had a parent that abused you or didn't let you become who you were. You had to conform to, family values or societal ways. And so you were kind of like under their thumb. They were your parental figure. They're how you ate and how you were fed, clothed, sheltered, supported. And so in a past life growing up, you would do whatever they say, right?
Yeah.
So you could come back into this life in a relationship and they're not your parent, right? But you still have those same, the same feelings like, oh, I better do what they say because if I don't, something bad will happen. They're the only person that's going to love me like this. You know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, what the lesson really is to own your own power, right? And to stand up and become who you truly are, not who you're conditioned to be.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask about on the same topic, but about sex. Like having somebody that you have an amazing sexual connection with, but you know that they're not the right person for you, but somehow you end up circling the drain because of the sexual attraction. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So karma can be transmitted through sex as well, because it's through sex, the fluids that karma happens. And so that's why they'll always say, oh, you better watch out who you sleep with because you're sleeping with all the people that they've slept with. So it's really funny how those kinds of things kind of happen. But with respect to sleeping with somebody, you could, and this kind of goes back, right, is that you could have been a prostitute in prior lives and they could have been, your clients and you enjoyed them in that way. And so in this life, you still do, except the situation is, completely different. Or it could be things where you are learning to grow sexually as a person. And so you'll bring and attract people into your life that will allow you to open yourself up to go to that place where with maybe other people you don't feel open to do it, you're not comfortable doing it with, but somebody from your past life you are.
Wow.
And you see, you'll see that, like you'll see that in the natal charts whenever you have something in the 8th house or with like the South Node or anything having to do, with the sign of Scorpio or a Venus-Pluto connection. Usually when a couple has a Venus-Pluto connection or a Venus-Mars connection, you'll get that great sex.
Oh, awesome.
That's
good
awesome.
To know. Yeah.
That's really great. We're gonna just cut it out here just for a second. We're gonna take a really quick little commercial break, and then we'll go ahead and hop back on with you here in a minute.
Okay.
All right. We'll be back.
Yep.
Hi guys, Jen with Define Nobodies podcast. Our commercial break today is brought to you by puppiesmakemehappy.com. I'm actually wearing my Puppies Make Me Happy shirt here, and Sancho is the inspiration for this t-shirt. This is our 16-year-old Pom. He's the best in the whole world. So if you're interested in puppiesmakemehappy.com, this is where you can go and purchase a t-shirt, and the proceeds go to animal rescues in the area. So please go visit them at puppiesmakemehappy.com and get your t-shirt. Have a great day.
All right, welcome back. We've just been diving really deep into this interview with Yvette Thomas. We covered a lot of things so far. We talked about twin flames and soulmates, elaborated more on the sort of the sexual compatibility between two people. So we're back for more.
Yeah. So I was looking at your IG and I saw that you have a new series coming up about signs and sexual compatibility. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So sexual compatibility has to do with your Venus relationship and Mars. So what you do is you look at one person's Venus and see if it connects with another person's Mars, and it connects via sign. So some signs work together and some signs don't. So for an example, you have, 4 different elements: water, air, earth, and fire. And fire and air makes the fire grow, so they work together. And earth and water, water makes the earth grow, so they work together. It's when you try and combine, say, for example, earth and air, they don't work out so well. That makes dust. And fire and water puts out the fire. So, it's very challenging to do that. So I created a series because people always want to know, well, are we going to get along? Are we going to have good sex? Like, how's it going to be? So for an example, if you put 2 water signs together, right, each element has a need. And the water signs need emotional connection. That's just how they're structured. They can't help it. They need it. They need to feel loved. They need to feel compassion. They need to feel a deep connection. So if you put 2 water signs together, they get each other. So if you take, for an example, like air, like Gemini, right? Gemini is not a heart-driven sign. They're not emotional. They don't like it. When it comes to emotion, Geminis rationalize. Okay, here's how it is. I'm gonna think about it. This is how it's gonna be. It goes like this. I'm not really down with it. I don't like it, but it is what it is, right? And they move on. So they need an intellectual connection. They don't need an emotional connection. In fact, emotion will overwhelm fire. They'll overwhelm air because it's not rational. It's not logical. Emotion, it can't be. It doesn't work like thinking. And so with respect to sexual styles, the air and the fire signs, they want to have fun. It's like, where's the party at? I want to get in there. I want to role play. Let's talk. It's got to be exciting. I love it. Do we need to be committed? Who cares? I will figure it out later. Where's it going? I don't know. I know it's happening right now. I'm good, right? So water signs, they're like, okay, yeah, I need an emotional connection. I need to feel loved. I need you to understand my feelings. I need you to listen to me. I need you to touch is super important. And then you have like the earth signs, and they're just like, okay, well, we have 10 minutes to do this. Where do I see you in my future? Let me map it out. What's your career? How are you going to financially, support this relationship? Where are we going? Right? So those are kind of the different temperaments of the signs. So you can imagine when you start to like mix it up, where people, they just don't connect because they're not wired the same, right? They aren't. And so for an example, I did a post on, Sagittarius and Taurus, and Sagittarius is a fire sign and Taurus is an earth sign. So Taurus likes stability. They like routine. Sag, they like whatever. They want to have a good time. They want to play. So this guy, so Sagittarius is like, oh my God, you're boring. Okay. You want routine. You're boring. Like the best I could do, and this is questionable, is spend your money, but I have my own. So even that is not working out for me, right? And then Taurus might say to Sagittarius, you are so irresponsible, you are so unreliable, and actually you're like a financial liability to me. So I don't want to be with you either. So you get, different ways of, or just different ways of being that you just are never going to see eye to eye on with respect to, a connection. So,
well, is it possible again, if you have 2 signs that are typically not compatible? Like, for example, I'm Aquarius and my husband is Cancer. So typically we're not like a match that works, but we have an amazing relationship. So does that have to do with other aspects of our chart?
Okay. So, and that's the thing, is that because people just know sun signs, right? Or you just know a Venus, or you just know a Mars. They think, oh, well, we don't match because it's typical, whatever, water, fire, it doesn't work. But what happens is that you need to look at the entire chart as a whole on both sides, okay? So when you start to get into like relationship compatibility, you need to look at the entire chart. You need to look at this at the south nodes. You need to look to see, are there personal planets connecting to the karmic planets. There's a whole lot of stuff that you have to look at for true compatibility. But with what I wrote as far as like sexual compatibility goes, because most people, they don't know other than one sign at a time, I mainly wrote on how the signs interact with each other.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really, really good information. So you can have, because I had been in a relationship in a while back, and I'm a Libra, and she was also Libra, and she was also a Gemini moon, right? So
oh wow.
Is it not good to have too much of a good thing, or when you have two signs that are sort of like identical in the star, in the rising, in the moon, like is that typically looked at as like a difficult connection?
So typically what we look at is the rising sign, the sun, and the moon. And it's, it's known as like the big three. And basically what that is that's think of it as like the skeleton of your personality, right? So for example, if you have a sun in a fire sign, right, and a person has a sun in a water sign, that's okay. Because if they have a moon in fire or air, they relate. Or if they have a moon or fire in rising, it works. So as long as you can blend that trio together, as far as like the elements go, there can be a connection between them, right? But it's when you get, for example, if you were to have like a fire, like two Sagittariuses together, and their moons were both fire and their risings were both fire, then you have to look at the signs, and it can be an overload. And I'll give you an example. Like Sagittarius they're not real big into responsibility. They're sign of the archer, so they're always wanting to know why, and they want to learn, and they want to uncover the world. And so if you have two people that have that same nature, it's like, okay, well, who's going to hold down the fort at home? Who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to be the grown-up? And so so it's like you hope that they have other signs and other elements in their chart that it kind of blends each other out. You can have, for an example, people will say, well, I'm a Sag and I'm domestic, and my moon is in Aries. It's like, okay, well, then you go to look at the planetary ruler of Aries, and their Mars is in Cancer in a water sign. So all of a sudden now, all that fire energy has been completely toned down by Mars being in Cancer, and which is water, and in a water house. And so their fire energy kind of takes a backseat to being able to express itself fully. So when you look at a chart, like I said, you have to look at the entire chart for both people as a whole, and see, what signs and planets do they have? Is there a dominant sign? Is it, is a certain element dominating the chart that's causing the other energy to take a back seat, or not letting it express itself? You could have where they have aspects that cause the planets not to be able to do certain things, to be who you are, or let your light shine bright, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's really, so obviously the synergy charts are really important. Now we just came in, I'm not an astrologer, but I follow it as much as I can. So I think that are we still in Venus retrograde right now? Because that just happened, right?
You know what? We could be for like, I think maybe another week or so.
So for people that aren't familiar with the Venus retrograde, can you elaborate more on the implications of that, maybe in comparison to something like a Mercury retrograde?
You have a planet that is in retrograde, okay? It means that the planet is spinning backwards. The energy is spinning backwards, right? So it's the same concept with Venus as it was with Mercury, except it has to do with relationships. So it's going back within, it is the energy is going back within yourself, reviewing your relationships, reviewing how you relate to people, because Venus is relationships and it's relating. And if Venus is in Taurus or the second house, it's talking about relating to yourself. And if Venus is in Libra or in the seventh house, it's talking about relating to others. Okay. Now, if you're born with a Venus retrograde, which only happens about every, I think, 2.5 years is what that span is. So it's not like, Mercury retrograde happens 4 times a year, Venus retrograde, not so much. And so when you're born with a Venus retrograde, from a past life perspective, every single relationship that you have will be a redo, and the energy is spinning backwards within yourself. So the person isn't so kind of touchy-feely and, wanting to be in relationships and, being so openly relatable to others. Because they're trying to relate to themselves. That's sort of how they view relationships. It's themselves first.
Yeah. And one thing that I also I heard about Venus retrograde is a call for people to not make really important decisions in the realm of relationships. Right. And is that something?
That's the same concept with Mercury. It's a review. So retrograde is review. It is to reflect, and it's to think about. It's not decision-making time, and you definitely don't want to leave a relationship during a Mercury retrograde. Now, you can get during a Venus retrograde, you can get, if Venus is retrograde, and it is aspecting your South Node, you can get people that come into your life from the past. An ex can call you, or somebody that you haven't seen for a long time that you had some type of relationship with can show up.
Yeah,
that's always fun when the ex calls.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
So what is your recommendation for people who, speaking of exes, right, whenever the exes pop back up and this is a person that for whatever reason you have a tie to, and this person isn't right for you, so as far as the healings and the teachings, what is your advice on that?
Super liberal when it comes to this, because my number one thing is I would need to see the chart. Because what happens is that you have to remember is that those two made, an agreement. What that agreement is, I don't know. What those lessons are, I don't know. And is it that they have broken up and made up 1,000,000 times? I don't know. It's not my story, And so what happens when I come across people like that, and I'll look at the chart and I will see what the lessons are. I'll tell them, hey, this is the lesson. This is what you're supposed to learn. And sometimes it's to stay and sometimes it's not, But usually when the karma's up, it. No one has to tell you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm curious because in your bio, you had spent a large period of time, obviously, in the corporate world, right? Yeah. And I'm guessing you had to leave that in order to get into astrology, or is it one of those things where you're trying to sort of balance it out right now?
Astrology was always part of my life. I always, was into it. And up until 6 months ago, March, not even 6 months ago, a couple of months ago, I actually left my corporate job. And I decided to take some time off and focus on writing my IG account and also working on creating an app, because I feel like if people have an app, if I would have had an app, right, that when I was going through a tough time, that I could just program my information into and it would spit out a story or spit out, this is why this is happening to you, I would have been so grateful. And
that's like a millennial's dream.
It's like a millennial's dream right there.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Right. And my goal is that I've walked that rough road when it comes to relationships, and I didn't have anybody to help me say, oh, here's what's going on. It's this transit. It's going to last for about this long. Here's what you need to do. If you need help, come back. Whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. But give some guidance, because I felt so lost and I felt like nobody understood, especially when you're in a soulmate type of relationship or soul grinder and you're just climbing this mountain and people think you're crazy and you're nuts and you're really smart, but you're making some bad decisions and you just are saying to yourself, but I'm not making a bad decision. This is my story and I know what I'm doing. You need to, let me live it. So,
reading these charts is so complicated. I mean, thank you for doing that and on the road to creating this app, because it's like when I look at charts, I'm like, what the hell does all this mean? And you really do have to go to different resources. I'm like Googling all over the place. What does this mean? What does that mean? There's really not a one-stop shop that has all of that information combined to kind of explain it to you. So, I mean, I'm so pumped to see this.
And I think she shared some of her page on your Instagram that you have these sort of like really cool memes that break down different elements of the synergy between two charts. And Jen's right. I mean, to try and demystify astrology, because I at some point wanted to get into it, but then you read a natal chart and you see these aspects and you see this circle with a bunch of scribbles all over it. And it's like, where do you start with that?
Confusing and but people want to know, and so when I got into it, it was like reading something from a long time ago, and it was so confusing, but I was so driven to understand it that sometimes I would bang my head against the wall and I'm thinking, what does that mean? I'm like, and come to find out like a year later, it just means the cat is black, but they've used all of these words and I'm just banging my head, like looking up in the thesaurus and the dictionary. I'm like researching all this stuff and I'm like, the cat is black. Wow.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Why didn't you just say that?
Yeah, exactly, right? So for me, I have come up with a way when people start to ask me on IG, what does this mean and how does this work? And, I will draw the planet out as a person. I'm like, okay, this is it. This is the planet and it's going to put on, the Sagittarius costume, right? So this is it. And this is your play of life. And these are, the different aspects of who you are. But it's aspecting, your sun is aspecting your moon. And when they're wearing these costumes, they don't get along so great. And they're like, oh, wow, that's easy, But, that's, you have to like break it down, simplistically. If you're actually going to, teach it. But I think that the app could really be a useful tool for people, especially like if you're going through a hard time, why is this happening? How long is it going to last? Type of thing.
Yeah. And that's what I love about your IG page. And for the listeners, they can find you at iChat Astrology on IG.
Yeah.
And I love your memes because the way it is worded is very real life. Like Eric preaches this being too woo-woo and being practical. And I really like how you have such practical applications in all of your posts. So I have a feeling that your app is going to be very similar to that, and I'm super stoked to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really important, especially now, because I think we're approaching an age in our sort of collective awareness as a civilization where people are starting to kind of take their salvation and their sovereignty into their own hands, right?
Yeah.
And I think astrology allows for people to do that by really going backwards through their chart, seeing where all their planets are aligning, and really do the work and trying to meet these sort of challenges and do what they need to do in order to prepare for these type of alignments and these type of like squares and conjunctions and trines and things like that. But I think it's always about where to start with most people and to demystify sort of the stigma behind astrology. But I do feel, even just from my experience, that people are a lot more accepting of it now. So I think you have a really great opportunity to really share your light work, especially with what's going on in the world right now.
Right. Absolutely.
I really agree. It's agree.
Yeah. So from your perspective on what's going on in the world as an astrologer, what can you say to all of the couples that are together, that are soulmates or twin flames? And obviously, because we're in a pandemic and people are in quarantine, that's changing the dynamic and how they interact with each other. What advice could you give to couples that are doing that work and spending a lot more time together?
You know, the people that you're with, you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's it, you know. And maybe it's a time where if you're miserable, guess what? This is maybe the wake up call that this isn't working out. And maybe you were staying in a relationship for money, or you were staying in a relationship for comfort, but maybe you're coming to find out this isn't who you are. This isn't what you want to do. And as a result of this pandemic, as soon as it's, you know, over, I'm making different choices and I'm getting out of this, you know. Or you have people that are together and it's like, you know what? I never thought I could ever spend 5 minutes locked up with somebody, let alone 5 months. And you know what? I really like you. It's good we're together, you know. Or you know what? You drive me absolutely crazy. And when you do this and you don't do that, and you know what? It's like, it drives me crazy. But you know what? I love you. So I accept it. I want to be with you, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like a playing field really of opportunity for those couples to go deeper into the work.
And I said, for me, astrology is it's just presenting, it's showing somebody a picture of their chart and showing them what their options are and what their lessons are, right? And that you tell them, here's your story. You know, you can do this, you can do that, or you can do, you know, both. But the option is yours. And whatever choice you make, that's for you, you know, because I feel like people feel so conditioned to do one thing or the other, or they want to do the right thing. And when you're so focused on doing the right thing, who you are is like blocked. So I think that just showing people stuff, you know, and talking to them about their chart and what's going on. And I'm going to tell you, 90% of the time, when people come to me and they'll ask me questions, I'm so conflicted about this, or I'm conflicted about that. And then I open up the chart and I talk to them and they're like, you know what? Yeah, deep down, I really knew that. They just need validation, you know? Yeah, just need validation. But I think, you know, astrology is a great tool to help in people's lives. Great guidance.
Great guidance. So if you had one thing that the pearl, what is the pearl that you want to share with our listeners before we wrap this up?
I think that the pearl is that getting to know who you are as a person and what you stand for will never lead you in the wrong direction, ever. It's that inner guidance that a lot of times we don't listen to that is our biggest enemy, you know? And if we could learn to like kind of open that up and listen to our soul, it will never lead you in the wrong direction.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Those of you that wanted to find even on social media, she can be reached at, I think Jen spoke about it earlier, but it's at iChat Astrology, right? On Instagram.
On Instagram, Twitter, and are you on Facebook as well?
Yes,
okay.
Facebook as well.
And we'll include some links on our website. If you guys want to go to just divine-nobodies.com, you will probably just be posting some information there so they can kind of track you and reach out. So I hope that the app will be available soon and that we could use it. Do you have kind of like a time frame of when that might be available?
Next 9 months, because I've had to write it myself. So,
and apps are
you have to write all of the combinations.
Yeah, they're not easy.
Yeah. So when that finally comes together, let us know. We'll have you back on, and then we can just talk about, I guess, the contents of the app, and hopefully we can get some people on there to start using it. We probably definitely will too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. If you need anybody to test it, let us know.
Well, thank you both for having me on your show. It was great. It was great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a really beautiful journey just speaking with you today. Thank you so much for just elaborating on so much information. I was really excited to talk to you about the whole twin flame soulmate thing, because it's one of the things that I'm really fascinated with. So I'm glad to get the insight.
For sure.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.